picture is worth 1,000 words is an old adage we've heard, I don't know, since the beginning of time, which means my camera roll on my phone over here is worth like 11 million words by now. What can I say? I do a lot of different performing things and I like to keep footage from all of them. Sadly, today's photos aren't going to be quite as pleasant, but what they're hiding? Fascinating stuff. Michael Clark Rockefeller was born in 1938 and was the youngest son of New York Governor Nelson Rockefeller, and also the newest member of a dynasty of millionaires founded by his famous great-grandfather, John D. Rockefeller, one of the richest people who ever lived. Even though his father expected him to follow in his footsteps and help manage the family's vast business empire, Michael was a quieter, more artistic spirit. When he graduated from Harvard in 1960, he wanted to do something more exciting than sit around in boardrooms and conduct meetings. I can't say I blame him. His father, a prolific art collector, had recently opened the Museum of Primitive Art and its exhibits, including Nigerian, Aztec, and Mayan works. And these fascinated Michael. He decided to seek out his own primitive art, his words not mine, and took a position on the board of his father's museum. It was here that Michael felt he could make his mark. He had traveled extensively already, living in Japan and Venezuela for months at a time, and he craved something new. He wanted to embark on an anthropological expedition to a place you would ever see. So after talking with representatives from the Dutch National Museum of Ethnology, Michael decided to make a scouting trip to what was then known as Dutch New Guinea, a massive island off of the coast of Australia, to collect the art of the Asmat people who resided there. So by the 1960s, Dutch colonial authorities and missionaries had already been on the island for almost a decade, but many Asmat people had never seen a white guy. With severely limited contact with the outside world, those people believed that the land beyond their island was inhabited by spirits, and when white people came from across the sea, they saw them as a supernatural being or a threat. Michael and his team of researchers and documentarians were thus a curiosity to the village of Utjanep, home to one of the major Asmat communities on the island and not entirely a welcoming one. The locals put up with the team's photography, but they didn't allow the white researchers to purchase cultural artifacts, like bij poles, intricately carved wooden pillars that served as part of their rituals and religious rites. Michael was determined though. With these people, he found what he felt was a fascinating violation of the norms of Western society, and he was more determined than ever to bring their world back to ours. Now at the time, war between villages was common, and Michael learned that the Asmat warriors often took the heads of their enemies and ate their flesh. In certain regions, Asmat men would engage in ritual homosexual intercourse, and in bonding rites, they would sometimes drink each other's urine. So Michael came back and was like, okay, I need to go back, I need to know more. So he set out once again for New Guinea in 1961, this time accompanied by Rene Wassing, a government anthropologist. Now as their boat approached the region on November 19th, a sudden squall churned the water and riled cross currents. The boat capsized, leaving Michael and Wassing clinging to the overturned hull. Even though they were about 12 miles from shore, Michael was like, I think I can make it, and he jumped into the water, and you guessed it, he was never seen again. Now because his family was rich and politically connected, they ensured that no expense was spared in the search for the young Rockefeller. Ships, airplanes, helicopters, all looking everywhere, searching for Michael or some sign of him, but nothing. So the photo I went with today shows Michael surrounded by the people he was studying, which might have ultimately been his downfall. Now the official cause of death would later be listed as drowning, but there's a strong theory that he was the victim of the traditional people hunting and consuming acts that were all too common by those who lived in the area. Anthropophagy was only part of the sacred ritual of headhunting that brought meaning to Asmat culture, and it looks like he was the victim of that. So if we look at our next photo, it just looks like a slightly off visual of a young human wearing a blue outfit with blue eyes, right? Well, what if I told you that that specific young human was already dead, and this was an example of post-mortem photography? This is a practice with roots entwined in the threads of history, and it offers a glimpse into the intricate relationship between life, death, and the visual documentation of the departed. Emerging alongside the daguerreotype in 1839, this photographic tradition became a poignant means for the middle class to immortalize their loved ones, previously a luxury confined to the upper echelons of society. The last sleep was a common pose for the deceased, and it captured the departed in a serene repose, their eyes closed, frozen in a semblance of eternal rest. The Victorian era, which was characterized by societal norms and artistic sensibilities, witnessed a surge in post-mortem photography, with images often portraying deceased young humans cradled in the arms of mourning mothers. The long exposure times of early photography made capturing deceased subjects more feasible, and as the practice flourished, it became intertwined with mourning traditions. As the carte de visite revolutionized the field, enabling multiple prints from a single negative, post-mortem photographs gained accessibility. Families could now share these mementos, with mailed copies serving as a tangible connection to departed loved ones. The mid to late 19th century in America saw a shift towards private postmortem practices, as the living were captured in mourning tableaux surrounding the coffin, cementing the deceased place within the familial narrative. Cultural nuances in postmortem photography vary globally, by the way. In Iceland, the practice was prevalent in the early 1900s, but waned around 1940, with its continuation transitioning into amateur photography for personal remembrance. In the United Kingdom, post-mortem portraits were particularly popular during the Victorian era, with styles mirroring American traditions. India, with its unique beliefs, sees death photographers capturing moments at the burning ghats in Varanasi, providing families with tangible memories and proof of death. The practice does continue to today, albeit more privately, with artists delving into this nuanced aspect of visual storytelling. The National Museum of Iceland houses collections of post-mortem photographs, offering a poignant glimpse into the cultural and emotional landscapes of a bygone era. So these photographs, frozen moments capturing the intersection of life and death, transcend time, allowing us to peer into the intimate narratives of those who have departed, forever preserved in the photographic emulsion of history. But it's still kind of creepy. So who here has ever thought of going on a game show? I remember when I was younger, I used to genuinely think I could rock it on Jeopardy! Yeah, not anymore. I'd like to turn your attention now towards this visual from the dating game, back in 1978. See the circled man? Yeah, that's a serial killer by the name of Rodney Alcala. By the time of that appearance on the show, he had taken advantage of several women against their will and killed at least one. He won the game, but the woman that he won the date with never went on said date, so you can bet how relieved she was. Sorry, I should backtrack and explain why. So he was sentenced to death in California for 5 killings committed between 1977 and 1979, receiving an additional sentence of 25 years to life after pleading guilty to 2 further homicides committed in the New York State in 1971 and 77. While he's only been officially linked to 8 killings, Rodney's true number of victims remains unknown and could be much higher. Authorities believe the actual number is as high as 130. Rodney compiled a collection of more than 8,000 photographs of women, young girls, and young boys, and many of them in explicit poses. In 2016, he was charged with the 1977 killing of a woman identified in one of his photos. He's known to have attacked at least one other photographic subject, and police have speculated that others could be victims as well. Prosecutors have said that Rodney toyed with his victims, gripping them until they lost consciousness, then waiting until they revived, sometimes repeating this process several times before finally ending their lives. One police detective described Rodney as a killing machine, and others have compared him to Ted Bundy. He passed away of unspecified natural causes in 2021, but we're still going to find out more about his killings, I think, for the rest of my life. So to the innocent eye, this photo could simply resemble a group of friends heading out on a skiing trip. A cheerful afternoon that might end near a fire at a lodge while clutching cups of hot cocoa. Sadly, that's not the case. This photo shows the 9 hikers from the Dyatlov Pass incident who died in northern Ural Mountains between February 1st and 2nd of 1959 under uncertain circumstances. The experienced trekking group from the Ural Polytechnical Institute, led by Igor Dyatlov, had established a camp on the eastern slopes of Kholat Syakhl in the Russian SFSR of the Soviet Union. Overnight, something caused them to cut their way out of their tent and flee the campsite while inadequately dressed to heavy snowfall and sub-zero temperatures. After the group's bodies were discovered, an investigation by Soviet authorities determined that 6 of them had died from hypothermia, while the other 3 had been killed by physical trauma. 1 victim had major skull damage, 2 had severe chest trauma, and another had a small crack in his skull. 4 of the bodies were found lying in running water in a creek, and 3 of these 4 had damaged soft tissue of the head and face. 2 of the bodies had missing eyes, 1 had a missing tongue, and 1 had missing eyebrows. The investigation concluded that a compelling natural force had caused said deaths. Now, numerous theories have been put forward to account for the unexplained passings, including animal attacks, hypothermia, an avalanche, katabatic winds, infrasound-induced panic, military involvement, or some combination of those factors. Russia did open a new investigation into the incident back in 2019, and the conclusions were presented in July of 2020 that an avalanche had led to the deaths. Survivors of the avalanche had been forced to suddenly leave their camp in low visibility conditions with inadequate clothing, and, well, hypothermia did them in. The mountain pass in the area was later named Dyatlov Pass in memory of the group, but it's just such a sad situation. This last photo is a real cutie, and one that breaks my heart. You see what looks like a happy father-son duo posing for a photo in a suburban small town. Heck, if you tweaked it a little bit, it could look like the main drag of the place where I grew up in. What nobody in this photo knew at the time was that the red vehicle next to said duo was wired with explosives and about to blow. They both passed away moments later. That day came to be known as the Omagh Event of 1998. Taking place in Northern Ireland on August 15th, it killed 29 people and injured more than 200 bystanders. Carried out by members of the Real Irish Republican Army, it was the deadliest attack during the 3 decades-long conflict known as the Troubles, which pitted those who wanted Northern Ireland to remain unified with Great Britain against those who didn't. Telephoned warnings, which did not specify the actual location, had been sent almost 4 40 minutes beforehand, but police inadvertently moved people towards the explosive instead of away from it. British, Irish, and US intelligence agencies allegedly had information which could have prevented this event, most of which came from double agents inside the real IRA, but this information was not given to the Royal Ulster Constabulary. That day caused outrage both locally and internationally, spurred on the Northern Ireland peace process, and dealt a severe blow to the dissident Irish Republican campaign. The real IRA denied that the explosives were intended to kill civilians and apologized, shortly after the group declared a ceasefire. As a result of that day, new laws were swiftly enacted by both the United Kingdom and Ireland. And that brings us to the end of our time, and I think I need to go hug a friend tonight or something after that. I've been Alexa, your resident ookie spooky girly, and if you enjoyed my ramblings today, could you help us out by giving this video a like, subscribing if you aren't already, hit the bell for more darkness from us here at Top 5 Scary Videos, and I'll see y'all next time, you lovely spooky people.